Today, the Constitution of the United States is the object of unparalleled admiration and respect, both here and abroad. But in 1787 and 1788, it was widely criticized, and in every state, there were many who opposed its adoption. The battle over the ratification of the document was not easily decided. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the Federalists versus the anti-federalists. Our objectives today include identifying the opposing sides in the fight for the ratification, describing the major arguments of the Federalists and the anti-federalists, and lastly, describe the inauguration of the new government of the U.S. One of the main voices of this bitter debate would be Alexander Hamilton. He stated, "Vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty." As a major Federalist, he wrote several Federalist papers. This came from his first Federalist paper. So, while we're watching this, do you agree with Hamilton's point of view? Are you a Federalist or anti-Federalist? If you remember from the last video, the Articles of Confederation provided that changes could be made to them only if all the state legislatures agreed. But the framers had determined that the new Constitution will replace, not amend the Articles. They had seen how crippling the requirement of unanimous decisions could be. So the new Constitution provided that only 9 out of the 13 states would be sufficient to ratify. On September 28th, it sent copies of the new documents to the states. The Constitution circulated widely and was debated vigorously. Two groups quickly emerged in each of the states: the Federalists, who favored ratification, and the Anti-Federalists, who opposed it. The Federalists were led by many of those who attended the Philadelphia Convention. Among the most active were James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. The opposition was headed by such well-known Revolutionary War figures as Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, John Hancock, and Sam Adams. So let's look at the two arguments. The Federalists opposed the Articles of Confederation because they believed that it was an ineffectual governing document. They promoted the ratification of the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists believed the Articles of Confederation needed to be amended, not abandoned, and therefore they opposed the ratification. When it came to authority, the Federalists believed in a strong national government. They felt a large republic is best for protecting freedoms. The Anti-Federalists felt a small national government and a small republic could protect rights. Some were also worried about the structure. Federalists favored separation of powers with checks and balances, whereas the Anti-Federalists wanted the legislative branch to have more power than the executive branch. They were worried that a strong executive branch could lead to a monarchy or a tyranny. Each side drew support from different people. The Federalists drew support from large farmers, merchants, and artisans, while the Anti-Federalists drew support from small farmers in rural areas. However, the lack of one major feature of the proposed Constitution drew the heaviest fire: a Bill of Rights. Federalists felt a Bill of Rights was unnecessary. Most state constitutions already had a Bill of Rights, but Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights to protect the rights of the people. In addition to the lack of the Bill of Rights, the Federalists favored loose interpretation of the Constitution. They also favored a national bank, especially Hamilton. This would make a stronger national government. The Anti-Federalists favored strict interpretation of the Constitution and opposed the national bank. Over the course of the struggle for ratification, an extraordinary number of essays, speeches, letters, and other commentaries were printed. Of them all, the most remarkable were a series of 85 essays that first appeared in various newspapers in New York in the fall of 1787 into the spring of 1788. Those essays supporting the Constitution were written by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay. They were soon published in book form as The Federalists, a commentary on the Constitution of the United States. All of the essays bore the pen name Publius, Latin for public man, and they were reprinted throughout the 13 states. They remain an excellent commentary on the Constitution. Ratification came fairly quickly in a few states and only after a bitter struggle in others. Delaware was the first to approve the Constitution on December 7th. The contest for ratification was close in several states, but the Federalists finally prevailed in all of them. On June 21st, 1788, New Hampshire brought the number of ratifying states to 9. Virginia's ratification followed New Hampshire by just 4 days. Due to James Madison's strong debate and George Washington's support, the Virginia Convention ratified the Constitution. In New York, the ratifying convention was bitterly divided. New York's approval of the Constitution was absolutely necessary. Its ratification of the Constitution on July 26 brought the number of ratifying states to 11. The victory there was largely won by Alexander Hamilton. The new Congress convened on March 4, 1789, in New York City. As promised, the first Congress created a Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They held election for the president and elected George Washington. They created a judicial branch with the Federal Judiciary Act of 1789, and the first cabinet positions were created. Take a peek at these things to answer. They will be beneficial in studying for your next assessment. I'd also love to hear from you. Do you side more with the Federalists or the anti-federalists? Also, do you agree or disagree with Hamilton's quote, "Vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty"? Why or why not? As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or comment below.